So it's great to have Janey McGill join us. She is a woman of many talents and incredibly courageous to boot. In her 40 odd years, she's been a lawyer, soldier, art dealer, life model, estate agent, amateur jockey, groom, dog carer, presenter, web designer, speaker, film consultant, photographer, and she's an adventurer. Arrowhead is the title of Janey's film that follows her expedition across the Empty Quarter. That's the world's largest sand desert in the southern third of the Arabian Peninsula, with 2 Omani women. With a male British and Omani crew in support, they are the first modern women to walk the Empty Quarter, which is 758 kilometres across. That's the equivalent distance of London to Switzerland, over 28 days, and with a clear objective: to challenge prejudices, to break down stereotypes, and to deliver a message to the world that we are better together, regardless of culture, gender, or identity differences. And you have fascinated me since I first came across you and your expedition. So welcome to the podcast, Janey. It's good to have you.
Thank you very much, Michelle and Liz. That was it's funny when you hear all that stuff back because, we're just muddling along at the end of the day, aren't we?
Exactly. And it's been a while now, hasn't it, since you've done that expedition. But we just wanted to... Okay, number one, why?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Why? Yeah.
Oh, but do you know what? It was probably a lifetime of experiences which led me to it. But the actual catalyst, I think, was I was dating this major in the SAS, and he had served in Saudi Arabia and did lots of training in the Empty Quarter. I'd never heard of this place before, but on our first date, he showed me this little ancient arrowhead, and I was totally mesmerised and overexcited by it. And I wanted my own one. I knew that I wanted to go to this mysterious, romantic place and find my own arrowhead. And that's really, I think, where the seed began.
Oh my God, you got me too. That is such a cool beginning to any story. I love it. Did you find an arrowhead when you went?
Well, I did find... And I did find an arrowhead. It wasn't an arrowhead in particular, but sort of metaphorically, I did. But I found this little rock which had Arabic writing in it. It was in the middle of a wadi, in the middle of nowhere, and just drawn to this little rock which had an inscription of some sort, but it was Arabic backwards. So it was really odd. I never got to the bottom of it, but I do still have it.
It was like you were meant to find it or something.
Yeah, I mean, just in this thousands of acres of wasteland, and I was drawn to that. It was bizarre.
That's so cool.
That's the archaeologist in me coming out. I'm really interested in that.
So looking at, I've watched the little YouTube clip, and I can't wait to see when this is, the bigger picture, literally, of all your video diaries and the stunning drone photography and everything. But if I can take you back to the beginning. So now we know why you chose the Empty Quarter. How did you pick the 2 Omani women, and why did they want to do it?
There was no specific method of finding them. It happened very organically through people that I met. I had been to Oman on a couple of recce's in the lead up to the expedition, and there were just a few people. I don't know. I think we were just drawn together. It was kind of one of those things that was meant to be. I found 2 women who were equally as disillusioned perhaps with the world and where we fit in it or what we do, and it was a very, they had a huge amount of enthusiasm and a need to do it as much as I needed to do it.
And they were complete amateurs, weren't they? Because even in that short clip, one of them is wearing flip-flops, and as she's walking, she's got like some blisters and so on, and she's like, oh, it's much better in flip-flops, actually. I think I'll just carry on like this. I love that sort of very
natural,
very approachable. It isn't all about, obviously you've got to have good equipment and you've got to have an incredible backup team, because it is one of the world's most hostile areas, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I think us girls, I was certainly just under the impression, if I've got water, I've got food, we've got fuel, we've got comms with a sat phone and microphones, walkie-talkies between the teams, I didn't see, if something goes wrong, we just deal with it. But with that in place, I didn't feel a huge amount of concern, really. I mean, I don't know, but I'm quite sort of, I suppose, not risk averse, what the opposite of risk averse. I do like taking risks. I enjoy
Gung-ho.
that. It's exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe a bit maybe a bit gung ho, and I think certainly that may have caused some friction amongst the team. Because not all of us were gung ho, so there was sort of, some bits of why isn't this planned, and I'm like,
So how long did it take to plan the expedition, though? Was it, weeks, months, days?
So I think I had started conversations with production companies and Channel 4 back in 2014, I think. And then I had a bit of a meltdown with splitting up with a boyfriend. A bit of an identity crisis. So I moved to France to look after this blind dog for 18 months. And then I really picked it back up when I was in France. So I was pushing a lot more. And that's when I managed to get Land Rover to sponsor as well. A lot of this was also just through my network, and contacts, and having been put out. I was doing a lot of walking before anyhow. So people were aware that I was on this kind of mission, I guess, of discovery or rediscovery because I, totally lost my way.
What, before you did this expedition, you felt like you had lost your way? So what led to that then? Was that what circumstances had ended it? I can't even speak.
That's welcome to my world.
But what I meant was, so how did you end up feeling so lost?
Well, I was on my career path in the army, in the military. I was trained to be a lawyer, and I joined the reserves as I was training. And then my other big sort of passion and identity was horses and horse riding. So I married the two and was going to ride in the Royal Artillery Gold Cup. It's a military horse race. And I broke my back when I was training. And so that essentially drew a line under the biggest parts of me, if you like. So almost a large part of me died, really. And I had to re-find what it was, what I was without that, and who I wanted to be.
So were you incapacitated for a long time? Were you hospitalized, or how did that work?
I was in hospital for about 3 weeks, and I had quite a substantial amount of metal work put in to keep me upright. So I was, I think, incredibly fortunate at this time to have broken it, in this day and age where we can have all of that gubbins put in. So it probably took me 2 years, I think, to get back to full fitness.
So does that
mean... But now
I
feel fitter than I ever was.
So with such a sort of a life-changing injury, if you like, did that mean you couldn't continue working in the army, in the Royal Artillery?
Yeah, it put a stop on doing the course that I would have needed to do to become a lawyer within the army. I had been on leave of absence for, I think, 18 months, and then administratively I was discharged. And then I tried to rejoin the Navy and the army afterwards, but they wouldn't have me.
It's awful, isn't it? Did they help support you in many ways when you couldn't be part of it anymore? I can see why you started to feel like, so you had this very specific career journey.
Yeah.
How lucky that you'd got your love of horses and your being a lawyer and being part of the army, and then it all implodes. Yeah. So you're completely adrift.
I didn't realise that until a couple of years later, to be honest. The wheels really started to come off, and I went a bit AWOL. And I just went back to basics. I went down and lived with a friend of mine in Devon, in his old farm in the middle of nowhere, and I sort of went pot washing in pubs and things like that. And I really did just go back to absolute basics to just experiment and find out what it was that really kind of,
What drove you?
struck me. And
Yeah.
because the sort of normal jobs, I've really struggled with that.
It's clear you've got an adventurous spirit, and I can see why that wasn't going to last. So let's take you back to the desert then, and your journey there. So how did it start? It's 43 degrees, isn't it? 43 degrees centigrade, roughly. Sort of every day. It's just sand everywhere you look. The roads have stopped. I mean, in that video that I saw, even the expedition team, you've got to carry all your own fuel, haven't you? Because you can't just stop and refill up at the nearest oasis.
Yeah. We had to be sustainable for 2 weeks. So, and that was part of the desert where it's enormous flat plains, 6 kilometers wide, with the huge dunes that we imagine, that we sort of imagine of a desert. But with that, you couldn't easily get in and out to anywhere to refuel or resupply. So we had 2 weeks where we were but of course, with that comes huge amounts of risk as well for the drivers and the support team, because they're they're having to navigate over these dunes with enormously laden vehicles. So the flip risk is high. I'd say it's probably the risk for them was higher than for us walking.
Mm. And I think it's probably fair to say that it wasn't all sunny, happy journey, was it? With you and Althea and, oh gosh, I wrote her name down. Beta and Althea. Yeah, so it wasn't all happy days, was it, between the three of you? You got on each other's nerves a bit. Some of you may have wanted to go a little faster than others from A to B, to hit that target, because I'm assuming that if you don't hit that target, you could end up in quite a pickle in the middle of the desert if you don't get to a certain place by a certain time.
Yes, I think it was more behind the scenes what was going on. I mean, you have to understand, with these edits, it's edited in a very specific way, isn't it? And so there was a lot of emotional turmoil going on in our personal lives, and I think that's probably what drew us to the desert, to have that space to understand what's going on. And my dad was in the very latter stages of cancer, and so I really needed to get home, because I didn't know if I would see him again. So I was pushing hard. And there were other influences as well. I mean, you really, when you're in there and you're stripped of all your comforts and you're essentially with a group of strangers 24/7 in this very extreme environment, you have a mirror held up to your face, and it's ugly. Like, I saw things that I really, really loathed about myself. So all of these things, you're sort of faced with yourself, your weaknesses, your insecurities, and everyone else is faced with the same thing. And I think we found that those insecurities were really sort of bouncing off of one another. And it's only on reflection, I think, that we can see that. But we all still chat now.
Do you? I was going to ask that. Are you still friendly? Because you've been through an incredibly bonding experience, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, it really was, for me, like, probably one of the most fundamental things in my life, and a turning point for me and how I feel about myself. And a lot of the film is, on my side of the story, is with the relationship with my father, and that all plays into the patriarchy and the stereotypes and the prejudices, which essentially us as a group of girls really turned that round. I'm from the patriarchal family, and Beda and Athea are actually from matriarchal families. Beda's mother was a single mum but 30 years ago, when that was kind of unheard of in the Middle East. So, and likewise, Athia's mum, a very, very successful businesswoman. So, what we perceive and what we're told here in the West, it wasn't quite how it was. I mean, certainly, of course, it still is, but maybe these are the exceptions that break the rule.
And do you think you were able to break down those cultural differences and sort of just get to the essence of the three of you are just women facing an enormous challenge, and you're all the same, really? You've all got same burdens, emotions, worries, concerns. So you break it down to the essence of what you are.
That's exactly it, Michelle. It didn't matter where we came from at the end of the day. We were there, we were doing a thing for our personal selves, as a community, in a community spirit as well. And we're all subject to insecurities and and the strengths and weaknesses and emotions. We're the same. We're just dressed differently,
Yeah. What would you say you learned most about yourself and about the other women in your 2 weeks, 3 weeks you were there?
I think it's about perceptions and perspective. A lot of people think that you need to be the fittest person or be a specific type of person to do something like this, when actually you don't. I think it's a lot to do with your heart and what's important to you. And if something is important to you, you just do it. You just get on and do it. And, Michelle, Liz, it may not have been a priority for you to walk a desert, but if it had, you would do it.
And it doesn't have to be, I would say, something as big. That's an enormous expedition, what you've done. But I mean, it could be something as simple as setting yourself a challenge, like I'm going to get fit enough to walk the Seven Sisters pathway, or I'm going to try and, what was that mountain?
Ben Nevis or Scarfell's Pike.
Yeah,
that's what I want to do. Yeah,
I think setting personal goals is just a brilliant. I mean, it can be small. It can be able to touch the floor again, through Pilates.
Because we all think we can't do it, but you've proved that you can, and it's made me think. It really has.
Well, you're going to do your outdoor swimming, aren't you?
I still do.
I've seen that happen.
Well, no, outdoor swimming pool in the summer, but I'm going to do
Oh,
but it's true, we can do it. There's no excuse, but we always seem to find excuses, and you've proved that you can do it.
But literally,
we are our own limits.
Yeah, but what doesn't kill you does make you stronger. And I think women in particular, we take on so many burdens throughout our lives, emotional and physical, that we are incredibly strong. And it's very easy to fall into a, not humdrum, but a very normal, middling along.
Could you try again?
Oh, God, sorry, I haven't got my phone on. That's you talking. Sorry about that. Apologies. It's my watch.
Just do that, and then it will shut up, or I'll throw it out the shed, and that will shut it up too.
When yours starts going, I'll get revenge. Apologies.
That's all right.
So I'll just go back on that. So I think, as women, we have been through an awful lot, emotionally and physically. We hold up a lot of people, we multitask, but it's very easy to fall into normal or boring or just feel like you can't do it. And Liz and I are big proponents of reinvention of yourself at whatever age it might be. And, we're in our 50s, and I love setting new challenges for myself. Even doing a podcast, that's a bit of a scary challenge that we took on, because I've talked to you, haven't I, and said how basically we know nothing, still pretty much know nothing.
No, you've learnt a lot.
But we have learnt a lot, and we have gone on that journey. It's not quite walking the empty quarter, I will say that. But actually, going back to that, this is the way my brain works. Paul, I don't know how she deals with me half the time. I'm like, oh yeah, squirrel. Anyway.
No, I'm the same.
Talking of squirrels, did you see any scary, this is so banal, did you see any scary stuff in the desert? Like spiders and snakes?
There were lots of spiders, little ones, and we only saw one scorpion. And we got you have this sort of UV light almost, and it picks them up. But because we had the light, that was attracting the moths. So the moths and the scorpion were like having a to-do.
Oh, yeah, a buffet.
Yeah.
All you can eat buffet.
And I saw a sort of praying mantis kind of thing about this big. And there was only one night where I slept in a tent, and that was because at this particular camp that we set up, there were snake tracks, and I didn't really fancy a snake as a pillow.
So where did you sleep if you weren't in
So
a if you weren't in a tent usually, where did you normally sleep? The five-star
on the
Hilton up
rug
the
by
road.
the fire.
Sorry, I was just joking.
No, just
That's
on
Bear
the
Grylls.
rug by the fire.
Yeah, well, it wasn't like an emptied out camel or something. A carcass of a
No,
camel.
God,
That's
no.
Bear Grylls, isn't it?
No, man, I just took a sleeping bag. I kept it simple.
But wasn't it
the,
quite chilly?
It
it
was
colder? Yeah.
it was. So it would be, I think the hottest we had was about 45. And maybe the average was probably about 38, but it would really smack you round the face at 10 o'clock and at 2 o'clock. Like you would literally feel like you were getting doof by the heat. But then, yeah, it would get chilly at night. So I had a puffer jacket and I had a mountain sleeping bag as well.
Yeah. So when is your film has been picked up for distribution, hasn't it? And
It has, yes.
So when is that going to be coming out?
So we are waiting for a report. It went to a market in Cannes in October. And then, see, this is all new to me as well, this film stuff. So Matt filmed and edited and all of this over in LA. And so it's gone to a market, then it gets requests for views from broadcasters and channels. And then I guess they have a mountain of films to get through to see what their schedule is going to be for the next year. So we're waiting on a report next week to see if it's sold and hopefully find out where it's going to be shown. And it was pitched for an International Women's Day.
Mm-hmm. And now
that's where which makes huge sense, obviously.
It does. It totally makes sense. Now you do an awful lot of speaking, don't you? And motivation. I see that you deal with imposter syndrome. Love a bit of imposter syndrome. That's us right here.
But you're still doing it.
We are.
We're still
somehow.
That's
people pleasing.
Yeah. Oh God, not a nightmare.
What, people pleasing?
I think that was a big issue on the expedition because I was trying to please everybody and you just simply can't. And that, I think that was the reason of a fair bit of conflict because I was just trying to please everyone.
Do you think that's a lot to do with our gendered identities? Do you think because we're women we often try to please rather than, we're seen as bossy if we're telling people what to do all the time, as opposed to you would expect Ralph Fiennes to be the boss of an expedition and you're going to do this, we're going to get here by 5 o'clock this afternoon. And so it's that perception, isn't it, of a woman, she takes charge, she's bossy, God, she's annoying. But if a man takes charge, it's just an alpha male doing his thing.
He's been the leader.
Well,
yeah.
Yeah, I tell you, there was a bit of conflict between me and the support team as well, because I think one of the support he was very nervous and anxious about us and wanted us to rest at lunchtime. So I was just like, okay, fine, we'll rest at lunchtime. We didn't need to rest at lunchtime. But I was kind of keeping him happy. But then I think that stems back to my father and keeping him, trying to please him and keep him happy. And just, he was quite a tempestuous character and trying to keep the status quo, So I think it stems from the past for sure. But it's only until it starts playing out and you start recognizing it, do you see that it's not helpful. But then I think the hardest thing is to then change those behaviors.
Hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it? Let's face it.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And I think that's where the imposter syndrome creeps in as well.
So do you still feel like you've got imposter syndrome in things that you tackle, or do you?
No, I feel very pragmatic about these things now. If I want to do something and I want to achieve something, come hell or high water, I will do that. Whether I know how to do it or not, I will find out. Like we have the world at our fingertips now, and there is nothing that you can't find out from either your network or asking someone or Google. You know, it's the seeds are all there. It's just how much you want it at the end of the day. And I also look at other people. You know, actually, I look at the state of governments and the people and the choices that our leaders are making. And I draw a lot of comfort from that, because the whacking great mistakes they make, they're supposed to be in charge of a country, and yet it doesn't compare to my little mistakes, you know. So I do kind of draw a lot from that, for myself, for my self-confidence.
Were you able to get to a place emotionally and with the time, were you able to get back and see your father and before he died and resolve perhaps some issues that must have been troubling you for years?
I did get back. I think 3 days later, he went into a hospice, and he died 3 months after that. That was like being on the expedition over again, because there was so much uncertainty. I'd never seen someone sort of degrade through cancer, so that every day was something different, and I'd never seen someone die before either. So that was all new experiences for me, and it was the same as the expedition. It was just sort of his final adventure, and still uncertainty, obviously, because we don't know where that if there is a next step. But really, I think every day I still learn from him. Every day, I mean, I think he's a character that you could never really understand, ever. What I realized was that why he was the way he was, because that expedition taught me his frustrations, potentially with me as well, because I think I felt them with Vader and Athea. You know, sort of that potential, I know you can do more. And I think he had that with me. I know you can do more, but it just made you feel so rubbish because you weren't quite there. And so those things really filtered through. And then once I'd done that, all of a sudden it became clear, and I could let it go, you know, and let the resentments and the frustrations within our relationship, I could let that go.
And you got that opportunity.
And he's human, for God's sakes.
Yeah. Are you his only daughter? Are you the only girl in the family?
I have a big brother.
I just wondered, because it seems to me, again, about sort of how as a female you feel with somebody encouraging you, motivating you, but maybe like pushing it too much, making that challenge so difficult. As you said, you can't always achieve what somebody else really, really wants for you. You know, don't know how to express it better than that, really.
It's whether you want, but it's whether you want to as well. I think
quite. Yeah.
You know, it's up. Yeah.
I also think, though, you know, what he told me and what he told other people were two very different things. You know, if you speak to any of the people he knows, he was so proud of you, and I was like, was he? Was it? You sure? Because that's not what he told me. You know, I think that's a sort of very traditional way of, you know, he was very traditional.
It's quite generational, that, I think. I think that's...
yes.
I'd like to feel that we're not... I don't know. I'm getting a bit worried about my kids.
Do you think men are perhaps a little bit... I think men are a little bit better with their emotions now. They're allowed to be perhaps a bit more open now. Certainly, I think my son is quite open about... He's not... Don't ever cry. It's not that anymore. Yeah. You know, I think we've grown a lot, haven't we, over the last 40 years or so, and allowed emotions to be... I mean, God, shared all the time over TikTok and Instagram, and, you know, shared.
It wasn't quite so,
Yeah.
Yeah. It
Getting the
does beg the
balance right.
question, doesn't it? Is how, yes, exactly. When are we going so far the other way? Do we need to sort of re-find an equilibrium? I'm not sure. But
And
then the
also when you're
equilibriums never last anyway. So
Yeah, but I think I sometimes wonder when people are filming these very sort of emotional things on, and I'm talking not like your level, not filmmaking. I'm talking about young people on TikTok when they're crying their eyes out because, I don't know, Take That have split up or something. But, there's a bit of a, I know that's trite, but it's a bit like genie out the bottle, isn't it? Once you've shared that emotion, be it about Take That or about, some of the terrible stuff that's going on in the world right now that is shared almost on it is on a real time basis. You can't put that back in. You can't, you can't strip away what you've shared because it's always out there. And I think it's very hard for young people to understand that being authentic is a wonderful thing. That's great to be authentic with your friends, with your family, and not to hide things for your mental health. You should be seeking help if you really are upset. But sharing it on social media, I think it can be quite a dangerous thing. It betwixt and between, because you could be sharing something and someone else sees it like, "Oh, that's how I feel. That's exactly how I feel. So now I've got a tribe. I've got two of us who feel the same things." But I'm kind of going off on a tangent here. But I just think young people just don't get it sometimes. That, sometimes they should share, but they should know where to share and when to share. And it's a shame we can't just learn how to erase what we don't want out there anymore.
yeah,
That's not going to happen.
That was deep and weird, wasn't it?
oversharer.
No, but yeah.
No,
I
but
think I know where you're going.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm a massive oversharer, but
Are you?
I'm not an oversharer. Yeah, oh yeah, but not on outside events. I'm an oversharer on my personal conflicts. Do you see what I mean? Not to do with sort of Hamas and Jewish people. I'm not sharing about that. But personal conflict I will share about, which is not, I don't think, as dangerous.
Yeah, you're giving yourself
and
permission to do that, aren't you?
Well, it's not recorded, is it?
And I'm guarded still. I'm still. I mean, I'm not going to go on social media and cry. I just won't. I don't really cry anyway, so.
I have a feeling you're quite stoic. Well, look, what are you going to do next? Because you can't possibly just finish this and not have something else that you've got up your sleeve. I would imagine you're planning some new expedition.
Well, I've got one or two ideas, but one heads into Russia, which is probably not best at the minute. I've got fingers in pies, so like I've got business ideas that I want to pursue now, and it's more. I don't feel the need to prove myself anymore physically. Like if something came up that really grabbed at my heart, then I'd do it. But currently, I'm very happy just living in Oxfordshire with my two little dogs and walking locally. And just plugging away at the laptop on these business ideas. But also my travel itch is fulfilled by I travel with my photography. I work with a classic car company in Switzerland, so I go to Italy quite a lot and Mexico in the coming year as well. And my partner surfs as well, so I've actually started doing the marketing for a surf camp in the Mentawai Islands, which is it's jungle basically. It's an island in the middle of nowhere. It takes 3 days to get to, and I'm doing his marketing because he doesn't know how to use a computer. So bits and bobs, but just things, and that's another thing. We take that for granted. But Dupy, who I'm doing this for, he doesn't even have email, and that, how can he run a business, a camp like that without those skills? So I'm filling in the blanks for him.
Right. You got skills.
Yeah.
It's been really lovely talking to you. I think it's incredible what you've done. And I want to, I've definitely want to see the whole film because I mean some of the drone photography. I don't know how much you had to do with that. The shots are stunning, and it really makes you realise what in the vast place you're in. There's you can't see anything for miles and miles and miles. I cannot quite imagine. I don't know, what's the opposite of, it's not agoraphobia, is it? It's almost like being claustrophobic by being in such an enormously big area that I think it would actually give me a certain amount of anxiety to think what it's like under the stars at night when it's dark, and if you get bitten by a scorpion, you can't get anywhere anytime quick, can you?
No,
I think you've downplayed the danger a little bit on what you took on board with that expedition, and the fact that your two Omani women that you were walking with, they were not trained walkers. That sounds clearly. They knew how
adventurers.
We were just normal people, and that, I think that was the key to it. We were just normal people, looking for something.
Do you think they took away as much as you at the end of it, and felt that they could go back into their cultural identity and be different, be the same, or deal with things in a different way? How do you think it changed them?
I think it was definitely a pivot moment for all of us. I think sometimes it's even more frustrating to have to go back after you've done something like that, to go back into society again. It's hard because you've been through this hugely transformative experience, but nobody else has changed.
Yeah, you're going back into the cage in a way, aren't you? You're just being bound again by cultural norms that you want to shake off, but potentially, and you've seen a different way of living, but you can't necessarily follow through.
Exactly. So I think it can go one way or the other. I think it's a bit like being a soldier on tour. When someone comes back from Afghanistan, they have had just this immense experience, and to then just go back and fit into normal life again is very challenging. Very challenging. So I say don't.
Don't fit in.
Don't fit in.
Don't. Yeah.
No.
Well, thank you, Janey. If our listeners want to try and find out a bit more about where you talk and what you talk about, it's on janeymcgill.com. Is that right?
Correct. Yes.
And
yes.
What's your Instagram so they can follow you as well?
It's Janey.McGill.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, Janey,
thank
you. It's been so lovely to talk to you. Thanks a lot.
It has
You've
been
inspired
really
us.
lovely.
I'll be getting
Yeah, maybe not the walk that far, but yeah.
Well, I could do the Seven Sisters.
I should do
Yeah, or to the next village or something,
Oh, we can do that, yeah.
Actually, the essence of this conversation is do something, really.
just do
put one
something.
foot in front of the other. And if you don't walk at all, start walking, start small, get bigger,
And
get bigger.
Look around you. I think that's the key. We're always so sort of straight, we're going somewhere or we're doing this. But if you just go for a walk and look at the flowers, look at the, through people's windows, maybe I shouldn't, but
It's true. Too many people are on their phones when they're walking or their headphones in. And much as we like them to listen to a podcast, I do find now when I walk the dog, I do look around more. Which I never used to do.
You notice things, don't you? And I don't know. I just think this is so beautiful. The trees in autumn and the colours and the pinks and the oranges and the yellows, and you just come away feeling quite sort of nourished. I think when you look around.
I think that's absolutely true. And did you know it's good for your gut? It's actually good for your microbiome. That going for a walk and being in touch with it can help change your gut health. Isn't that incredible? Pauline Cox told us that. But I also think, do you remember back in COVID days when we had the pandemic? Do you remember how so many people would comment on, I can hear birds? With planes not constantly droning above or leaf sweepers or whatever it might be. Just being in touch and listening and hearing birds, that will be one of the, is it awful to say one of the joys of that time?
I
think
COVID.
I think there are some things that we can take from that forced family time and lockdown, where we learned things about ourselves and each other, and we could take time to be more creative. Sometimes when those sort of things happen in society, creativity is so important, because we learn how to make appointments online for parent-teacher meetings, for going to the GP, for, people. Zoom became a thing. Yeah. So creativity within dire circumstances, it is the mother of invention, isn't it? In many ways. And, on the back of that, I just found listening to birds really joyful during that time.
You could just be, couldn't you? It was such I loved it because I had no expectation. I loved not having expectations, and I loved not having to make decisions.
Or go out. You didn't have. I didn't have FOMO.
Not going out.
I loved not going out. I loved staying in sweatpants.
It was. I think every. I think we said it before. Every year there should be 2 weeks of it. I think. Not of COVID, but of just switching off and just being with your, whatever you want to do on your own. I don't mean of lockdown itself, but I think reflecting on our own lives. And
other people do, don't they? Like Europe tend to shut down in August.
Yeah.
And even in small ways, just stopping for lunchtime. God, we don't even have that anymore, do we? Nobody just stops the shops at lunchtime and has, what is it? I'm going to call it a matinee. What the heck's it called in Spain?
Siesta. But then in France they have, I think they still do have long lunches, 2 hour lunches. Yeah. God, I'd love that.
They really need to start a movement.
I lived in an agricultural place, and they actually ring a bell at 12 o'clock for lunch to start. Is it like a siren that goes out to the farmers? It's lunchtime now.
Wow.
So it's a forced switch off.
Yeah.
So like your walk in the desert, we should all force ourselves to have a little reset every day or every month or every week, and just allow ourselves that time to listen and be and not do anything. Or just have lunch.
Body as well, like just.
I've been listening to Liz's body a lot. she had this probiotic.
Yeah, when I go for walks, I'm not sure it's good for your gut health. It's the opposite. It's certainly getting it moving.
Brilliant.
On that note.
Yeah, on that note. Thanks. Thank you, Janey. Keep in touch and let us know what happens with the film. It sounds so exciting, and well done. And I have no doubt that you'll do something else that's incredibly exciting as well. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been great.